Students, welcome to math homework help video, page 29, numbers 1 through 17 odd. Hopefully you are doing your homework. You need to do it every day, and make sure you're checking your answers in the back of the book. My recommendation is for you to not watch the entire video. My recommendation is for you to do your homework, check it in the back of the book, and then the ones that you get wrong, watch those problems and find your mistakes, okay? All right, let's start off with number 1. Numbers 1, 3, 5, and 7 are factoring out the common factor. So when I look at these two terms here, I look at the first term and I have a 2x, the second term is a 10. The first thing we do is we ask ourselves, coefficient of 2 and a constant term of 10. What's the biggest number that goes into both of those? Well, 2. Now I've got an x right here, but there's no x over here with this term. So there's no way I can pull an x out because they both don't have an x. So the only thing I can factor out is a 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put my parentheses. And then I say to myself, okay, I'm going to put a blank here. I've got to put something in this blank. 2 times something would give me 2x. Well, how about x? 2 times x is 2x. And now I'm going to put a blank here. 2 times something would give me negative 10. Well, think about it. 2 times negative 5. 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. And there, you factored out the common factor. Let's move on to number 3. All right. The directions say for number 3 to pull out the common factor. So look at your coefficients. You have a 3 and a 9. What's the biggest number that goes into 3 and 9? Well, 3. Now look at your variables. You have an x in this term and an x in this term. How many x's do you have? 4. How many x's? 2. So you cannot take 4 away from both. There's only 2 over here. But you can take 2 away from both of those. So I'm going to pull out 2 x's. So x squared. Now put your parentheses. And here we go. I'm going to put a blank right here. 3x squared times something will give me 3x to the 4th. Well, wouldn't it be x squared? Doesn't that make sense? I mean, think about it. 3x squared times x squared is 3x to the 4th. I mean, if you want to put a 1 here, you can. It's fine. I don't mind that. It's up to you. All right, now I'm going to put a blank right here. 3x squared times something would give me negative 9x squared. You got to think about it, but would it not be a negative 3? I mean, 3x squared times negative 3 is negative 9x squared. So there, we factored out a common factor. Let's take a look at number 5. All right. Now we're going to factor out the common factor. I notice I have coefficients of 4, 12, and 16. What's the biggest number that goes into 4, 12, and 16? Well, 4. Now, this term has an a. It actually has 2. This term has an a, has 1. There's a little 1 here if you want to put it there. It's up to you. This term does not have an a. So students, I ask you, how can you pull out an a? There's no way you can factor out an a unless every term has at least 1. And this term right here does not have an a, so you cannot factor out an a. So the only thing you can factor out is a 4. All right, 4 times what? It gives you 4a squared. Well, a squared. Think about it. 4 times a squared gives you a squared. Gives you 4a squared. All right, I have a negative 12a. If I put a negative 3a, let's see what happens. What's 4 times negative 3a? Well, negative 12a. All right. Now, I have a positive 16. So what would I put in this blank here? Well, how about a positive 4? Because a positive 4 times a positive 4 would give you a positive 16. So there we go. We factored out the common factor. Let's take a look at number 7. Now this one's a little more difficult, but kind of look at it like this. Because we have parentheses and it's pulling everything together, look at this as one term. Then here's a plus sign, and look at this as another term. Do they not both have a b minus 2? Sure they do. So pull out a b minus 2, and when you pull it out, you're left with a and positive c. So a plus c. That's a really hard concept to see, but trust me, it is accurate, and that is the right factorization. Okay, now we're moving on to number 9. Numbers 9, 11, 13, 15, and 17 are factor by grouping. Factor by grouping, and we learned this, of course, also in the lesson. All right, Let me get up my reveal thing here so we can use that. All right, and let's go ahead and give these problems a shot here. All right, now let's go ahead, and what we do when we're factor by grouping is we look at the first two terms, first two. And there's a 1 here, don't forget, even though you can't see it. And so I say to myself, what number goes into 1 and 3 evenly? Well, there really is nothing. I mean, you can put a 1 if you want, but that would be it, nothing else. Now I have 3 x's in this term and 2 x's in this term. There's no way I can pull 3 x's away from both of these, but I can pull out 2 x's from both of them. So I'm going to put an x squared and then go ahead and put my parentheses. Now, let's put a blank here. 1x squared times what would give me 1x cubed, or x cubed? Well, wouldn't it be an x? X squared times x is x cubed. Now, what would I put in this blank to get 3x squared? X squared times something gives me 3x squared. Well, wouldn't it be 3? X squared times 3 is 3x squared. All right, now let's continue on. Now let's take a look at the other two terms. All right, here we go. Now remember, I told you if this is a negative sign right here, which I know it's not, but if that's a negative sign, then be sure and pull out a negative number. But in this case, it is not a negative sign. Why is this not working here? Hold on 1 second. All right, there we go. We have a positive sign, so we're going to pull out a positive. And now I have a 6 into 18. What's the biggest number that goes into 6 and 18? 6 is. Is there an x in this term? Yes. Is there an x in this term? No. So you cannot pull out an x from either term. You cannot do that. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put our parentheses. And 6 times blank would give me 6x. Well, 6 times x would give me 6x. 6 times blank would give me 18. Well, 6 times positive 3. And now let's see if our parentheses matched. Yep, x plus 3, x plus 3. And they should match, okay? So you write your matching parentheses one time, x plus 3. And you're left over with x squared positive 6. So x squared positive 6 inside parentheses. There we go. And there's your answer. All right, let's move on to number 11. Okay, here we go. Factoring by grouping. Factor by grouping. So here we go. What you've been taught so far is look at the first two terms and pull out what's common in the first two. So here we go. There's no coefficients to worry about, so I look at my y's. I have 3 y's here and 2 y's here. I can't pull 3 away from both of them, but I can pull out 2. So I pull out y squared, put your parentheses, y squared times y would give you y cubed. Now think about this, y squared times blank would give you negative y squared. Well, y squared times negative 1. Anything times negative 1 just changes the sign. So y squared times negative 1 is negative y squared. Now let's look at the other two terms and see if we can't pull out what's common in these two terms. Okay, start with your coefficients. A 3 into 3. What's the biggest number that goes into 3 and 3? Well, 3 is, and there's a positive sign here, so we bring down a positive sign, and we put a 3. Now, there's a y in this term. There's not a y in this term, so you cannot pull out a y. So we're ready to move on. 3 times blank would give me 3y. Well, 3 times y is 3y. 3 times blank would give me negative 3. Well, 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Now, our two parentheses match, and they should. So we're going to write our matching parentheses one time, cross those off, and you're left over with y squared plus 3. Pretty easy, and it's called factoring by grouping. Just 3 problems left, and we're finished. 13, 15, and 17. All right, let's take a look at number 13. Now, again, we're factoring by grouping, and so we're going to look at the first two terms. Now, what's the biggest number that goes into 24 and 36? 12. 12 is. I have 3 x's here, 2 x's here. I cannot pull 3 out from both of those, but I can pull 2 x's out. And so here we go. Let's see what happens. 12x squared times something gives me 24x cubed. Well, I know I've got to put a 2 here because 12 times 2 is 24. And then x squared times x would give me x cubed. So there we go. 12x squared times 2x is 24x cubed. Now, 12 times something, I'm going to put a negative 3 here because 12 times negative 3 is negative 36. And I have x squared here. I have x squared here, so we're good. I don't need any x's here. So 12x squared times negative 3 is negative 36x squared. So that's good. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our last two terms. And here they are. Okay, we're dealing with a 72 and a 108. Now, I've got to think this through for a second. What did we use over here? 236 times 3. Yes, okay. Now, I know you probably wouldn't have thought this off the top of your head, but you would have had to try numbers over and over until you got the biggest number. But the biggest number to go into 72 and 108 is 36. That's the biggest number that goes into both of them evenly. And because you have a positive sign right here, you're going to put a positive sign here. Now, we pulled out a 36. Is there an x in both terms? No, there's not. So I'm going to go ahead and put my parentheses and get ready to finish what should be inside the parentheses. Now, 36 times something would give me 72x. Well, 36 times 2x. 36 times 2 is 72. And 36 times 2x would give me an x here. Now, 36 times a negative 3. 36 times negative 3 is negative 108. Now, let's see if our two parentheses match. Yes, they do, and they should. So I'm going to write my matching parentheses once, 2x minus 3, cross those off, and I'm left over with 12x squared plus 36. 12x squared plus 36. I hope you're doing this in your sleep now. It should be pretty easy. All right, let's take a look at number 15. Number 15. Okay. I'm going to go ahead now and quit using this slide thing. I've done that enough. It's probably getting a little annoying, so I think we've seen it. Okay, we just look at the first two terms here. There's a 1 and a 3. What goes into 1 and 3 evenly? Nothing except 1, so I'm not going to worry about that. I have 3 A's and I have 2 A's. Well, I cannot pull 3 A's from both of those, but I can pull out 2 A's. So I'm going to put a squared and put my parentheses. A squared times something would give me 1a cubed. Well, a squared times a is a cubed. Now, a squared times negative 3. A squared times negative 3 would be negative 3a squared. Very good. Now let's move on to our next two terms. First of all, notice that this term right here is negative, and whenever that happens, if this would have been positive right here, then you put a positive sign here. If this term is negative, then you put a negative sign. Now, a 2 and a 6. What's the biggest number that goes into 2 and 6 evenly? Well, 2. Are there a's in both of these terms that we can pull out? Well, no, not at all. So let's put our parentheses. 2 times negative 2 times a. Negative 2 times a would be negative 2a. Now be careful with your signs here. Some of you probably want to put a positive 3, but think about that. A negative 2 times a positive 3 would give you a negative 6. And you have a positive 6 up here. So how about this? A negative 2 times a negative 3. A negative 2 times a negative 3 gives you a positive 6. And now your parentheses match. A minus 3. Write that matching parentheses one time. And then we have a squared minus 2 left over. A squared minus 2. Hey, one problem left, and we're finally done with our homework. So that's good. All right, number 17. Here we go. Let's look at your first two terms here. Your first two terms. There's no coefficients to worry about, but I do have 3 x's and 2 x's, so I can pull out 2 x's. And if I do that correctly, x squared times x would give me x cubed, and x squared times negative 1. X squared times negative 1 will give me negative x squared. Now let's take a look at these two terms. This term is negative, so I am going to put a negative sign right here. I have a 5 and a 5. What's the biggest number that goes into 5 and 5 evenly? Well, 5. Do I have an x in both terms? No, so I cannot pull an x out. So let's go ahead and put our parentheses. Now watch your signs. A negative 5 times x. A negative 5 times a positive x would be negative 5x. A negative 5 times a positive x would be a negative 5x. A negative 5 times a negative 1. A negative 5, a negative times a negative 5 times a negative 1 would give you a positive 5. All right. Now notice your parentheses match, which they should. So we're going to go ahead and write our matching parentheses once, And when we do that, we're left over with x squared minus 5. X squared minus 5. And that is the end of the homework, okay? Guess I make a little better parentheses there. I hope this was helpful to you, and please continue to work hard doing your homework and taking great notes.